give them a little bit of grace. They both at least did this time. And they did move to their seats without stopping to talk to other people. So, no, he made it. All right, guys, that code will stay in the upper right-hand corner. We're going to finish up here with just a little bit more about that attempted Spanish invasion of 1588. If you guys learned about it earlier in history, it was probably called the Spanish Armada. That's how it's almost always known. And the Spanish Armada failed. An armada refers to a fleet, perhaps maybe a large fleet. It didn't work. A couple things went against the Spanish. One, and it's kind of captured in this painting, the English Navy, which would later be legendary as the most powerful navy on earth, is not the most powerful navy on earth in 1588. But they do have some clever sailors. That's why they've been so good at piracy, stealing Spanish gold. And the English have a strategy to help them kind of even the odds with the Spanish. They take ships that are not good enough to fight with, but still have sails. They set them on fire, and they point them in the direction of the Spanish fleet with the hopes of having this happen, where the burning English ships catch the Spanish ships on fire. Additionally, the weather turns against the Spanish Armada. There is a storm that kind of scatters their fleet and forces them to abandon the invasion and try to get back home to Spain. Nevertheless, we have talked about this event that kind of fizzled out because it helps us see the importance of our different motives. Religiously and publicly, we have both the Spanish and the English saying they want to fight for the religious freedom of their particular group, Protestant or Catholic, for example. And then we also have those private or ulterior motives. And here, another way to think about these different motives that aren't religious are secular motives. Now, secular motives could be public motives. All secular means is non-religious. And I do want to point out in all of these things, even if our question is to see if when we kind of pull back the veil, if so-called religious wars are really about religion or about something else, I'm not doing that to say that everything that is called a religious conflict is always something else, that religion is just a smokescreen or a deception. Religious motives are often genuine. Our question is whether they are the main reason for these conflicts or if other reasons, other motives are more important. Another reason that it's important to talk about Spain's attempted invasion is that it kind of shows us that conflict is brewing in Europe. Martin Luther kicks things off in 1517. By 1588, we have a major European country trying to invade another, if not super powerful European country. At least the English are and have had a history of being a powerful European country. And as we know, 30 years after this, we get the 30 Years' War beginning in 1618. And that's what we're going to focus on next, the mix of motives in that particular conflict. Again, our question is this, right? And we'll ask this for each of our conflicts that we look at. Next up, starting tomorrow, is going to be conflict in Ireland, and we'll ask the same question. In this case, was the 30 Years' War really a war about religion, or were those ulterior and private secular motives more important? these. If I have any that are missing, they're over here. I don't think I've got. No, that's not one of them. As we did with the Crusades, we're going to focus on these motives in terms of the main players. We have two categories here, rulers and soldiers. We will break soldiers down into their own two distinct groups. And we will start with the rulers. We're not going to look at all of the rulers. There are way too many of them even to name them, much less look at their motives. We've got kings and emperors for all of these different things, and if you look at the heart of the German lands, there are all kinds of little tiny kingdoms, principalities, duchies, free cities. So, too many rulers. We are instead going to focus on two of the most important. And they're both two men we have already met, Ferdinand II and Gustavus Adolphus. Ferdinand is most familiar to us. He was the guy, remember, who executed people by having their right hands chopped off and then disemboweling them. He is the Holy Roman Emperor at this time period. And he is the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire for most of the 30 Years' War. And publicly, his motive is to make the Holy Roman Empire a Catholic-only empire again. Because that Protestant Reformation that Luther started began in Germany, really up here it's strongest in the north, but it's also spreading over here and over into the Netherlands. He wants to get that back under control and assert Catholic dominance over the whole empire. So publicly, this is a war of religion. As we saw with Queen Elizabeth, and we'll see again with Gustavus Adolphus, here we kind of have to put private and ulterior motives together. They're hard to separate, just as it can be hard to separate religious and secular motives. But in this category, he wants to crush rebellions by Protestants. And here we're talking about rebellions that might have something to do with religion, or might have a lot to do with religion, but they are political and military rebellions against his rule as the emperor. The big one that sparks the emperor's fighting is what's known as the Second Defenestration of Prague. Defenestration is kind of like disembowelment. It's a long word we don't use very often. Matter of fact, I would not ever use the word defenestration except in a world history class. I'd have no other reason to. Defenestration means throwing somebody out of a window. Yeah, I mean, who knew that had its own word? Yeah, but I mean, in German, Fenster is a window. So I guess if you defenester somebody, you're throwing them out of a window. Obviously, the Czechs liked to do this, right? It happened here in Prague. At this point, there is no Czech Republic, but it's in today what is the Czech Republic or Czechia, because the Czechs had not only done this in the second defenestration of Prague, but in the earlier first defenestration. It's kind of like our Queen Elizabeth. You can't have a 1 without a 2. And he wants to crush those rebellions and reassert his political control. In the question of which motive is more important, this is tough, in part because religion and politics are very closely linked. If you are a Catholic ruler and you want your subjects to also be Catholic, if you feel like it's your duty to maintain political Catholic control and Protestants rebel against you, religion and politics are both part of the story, and you can't really separate them. So we have to take kind of a closer look at Ferdinand himself. And we do know that Ferdinand was a zealot. And I want you to answer in the Pear Deck without looking it up. Guys, some students in second hour just copy and pasted some definitions in from the internet. I don't want that. I want to know what you guys think you know about zealots. What does a zealot mean? Or what does it mean to be a zealot, I should say. And again, just give me what you think it is. I'm not going to call anybody out if they don't get it right. I do want to see you guys trying. Hit refresh, Brenda. Yes, a little bit more time. Some people are wrapping up thoughts, so we'll take until 15 seconds left on this second timer. Yeah, Isaiah. Put in a pass for 5 minutes. Okay. I'm going to highlight this one. This was the closest. Now, lots of you went with killer. And zealots do often become violent. So, for those of you that went with killer, you're on the right track. Not about, if you were taking that as encouraging of killing, that's not what I mean, but in terms of your definition, this gets the close. Somebody who is really enthusiastic about something. And even that is a bit of an understatement. A zealot is a fanatic. And that's kind of where the word fan comes from, for like sports teams, for example. A zealot is an uncompromising fanatic. They believe what they believe, they want what they want, and they will accept nothing less than everything of what they want. And Ferdinand II was definitely one of those. Pay attention to when he's in power. He comes to power more than 100 years after Martin Luther has started the Protestant Reformation. So those ideas have been out there a long time. Ferdinand II, though, as a child, was sent to a Jesuit. Well, he was schooled by Jesuits, put it that way. And he was kind of cut off from everybody else while he was being educated by Jesuits. Jesuits, a very conservative group, monastical group within the Catholic Church. And he came out of that education feeling very, very passionately about his faith and about the importance of people following that faith and doing what the church called on them to do. He personally criticized harshly members of his own family, if he thought that they were not showing sufficient faith, weren't going to Mass often enough. So this was something that was very personally serious to him. So politics, important. In the case of Ferdinand, religion also clearly a major motive as well. So he's not just using religion as a cover for what he really wants to do. He cares about the religious side of this. Next up is Gustavus Adolphus. He is Sweden's king. He's king before the 30 Years' War, and he makes it well into the war. We're going to find out why he doesn't make it to the end in just a few moments. Publicly, he wants to defend Protestantism. So this is what we've got. We've got Catholics on one side, right? Catholicism linked to the Habsburg dynasty through Ferdinand II and the Holy Roman Empire. Then on the other side, everybody else who is opposed to the Habsburgs and who support Protestantism. He especially points out when explaining why he is fighting, why he is bringing Sweden into the war, that he is most concerned about freedom of worship for Germany's Protestants. Lutheranism has gone over well in Sweden. To this day, I'm pretty sure last I checked, Lutheranism was still the official church of Sweden, and it's called the Lutheran Church, not coincidentally because of Martin Luther. It's the church that builds directly off of his teachings. But on the private and maybe ulterior side, and certainly here I think you can detect more ulterior motive, more selfish things for Sweden and for Adolphus. He wants Sweden to be a great power in Europe. Aside from the days of the Vikings with the Scandinavians, this is Sweden's best moment, best opportunity to make itself a major player in Europe. But to do this, it's important that Germany remain divided, which is not, in a lot of ways, not a hard thing to do. As you saw in that map, Germany is this patchwork of principalities, cities, kingdoms, duchies, etc. And if he can keep stirring that pot, right, with divisions between Protestants and Catholics, he can keep Germany weak. And let's just take a step back to our map. So Sweden is here. I mean, at this time, Sweden is, some of this is now Sweden and wasn't then, but this stuff over here is no longer Sweden. That's Finland. Those are the Baltic countries. But Sweden's here. Germany is right there. So Sweden's not very far. They have an easy access to Germany. But that goes both ways. If, on the other hand, he can't keep that part of the Holy Roman Empire divided and keep the empire weak, then they're close enough to be a threat to him. So if he wins, Sweden gets to be a great power. If he's not successful, then Sweden is vulnerable. As I said, we get the same question about Adolphus that we got about Ferdinand. Which was more important? Religion and politics closely tied. As I said, Lutheranism has gone over very well in Sweden, becomes the official church. And a lot of times these Protestant leaders did genuinely support Protestantism. But politics also matters. Whatever the case, in the end, for Adolphus, we do know that he felt strongly enough about his motives that he was willing to put his money where his mouth was. Uh, Lots of rulers liked to have themselves painted as if they were at the scenes of various battles, even if they weren't actually at the scenes of any battles. But Gustavus Adolphus was a warrior king, and he died in battle. He felt strongly enough to actually participate in the fighting. There were some other kings that did this. For an example that's closer to our own history, King George III was the King of England when we broke away and became the independent United States. His father, King George II, was the last British king to lead an army in battle. And that wasn't that long ago. Now for our soldiers. And I told you we'd have to break these down into two groups. If you're wondering, did the soldiers really dress this way with pants that look like a soggy diaper that goes down to your knees? Yes. Yes, they did. Is it comfortable? I don't know. You're never going to catch me dressed in that kind of getup. But we've got the official army soldiers, what we would call regulars. And then we have mercenaries, the soldiers for hire. You guys have seen mercenaries in the news in your own lifetime, especially with the Wagner Group in Russia. Those mercenaries that have been fighting in Ukraine, their leader actually looked like maybe he was going to try to overthrow Putin, and then died in a plane crash, which I think will always remain suspicious, right? If you die of a weird radioactive poisoning or a plane crash in Russia, chances are the Russians did it, and it's not an accident at all. And they'll do crazy things. They will put an element that most of us have never heard of, polonium, in a sandwich to poison you. And so mercenaries have been in the news. These are not those same mercenaries, of course. Let's start with the regular soldiers. They did often personally feel strongly about their particular side of Christianity, Protestantism versus Catholicism. At the same time, being a soldier means that you are getting paid. It also means that you don't have to do some of the farm work, the menial, smelly, dirty farm work that other people in your town or village would have to do. That uniform, being part of the army, means you don't have to do those things anymore. And you get paid. So it could be a good life, as long as you didn't get killed in battle. That is, of course, always the rub. Good pay, prestige, but you might get shot. Mercenaries, on the other hand, this is much easier to tell. These guys are not motivated by religion. Now, that's a blanket statement, or you could find some mercenary who had strong religious beliefs, but we do know from the record that Protestant mercenaries might well fight for the Catholic side, and Catholic mercenaries might fight for Protestant countries. Because what motivates them is just the money. That's the whole point of being a mercenary. You sign on to fight for a specified period of time. When that contract is up, you can go work for the other side. A student in second hour asked if any of these mercenaries were famous. In terms of individuals, I don't know. I can tell you that one of the groups of mercenaries that can trace itself back to the Swiss Guards, that would be the best example. The Swiss Guards are still the official bodyguards of the Pope. You can see pictures of them. They still wear kind of like traditional-ish looking uniforms. They still carry pikes, which we talked about. Pike is kind of that axe head on a long stick that has a spike. But if you're thinking of trying to go after the Pope, uh, in addition to those pikes, they also have submachine guns. So don't advise it. Yeah, Wyatt. Yeah, after Drake. Or no, Drake needs some. You can go ahead, Wyatt. I thought he was getting the pass. Oh, he is getting the pass. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Wyatt. Then you'll be next. Oh, yeah, actually, that's a okay. That's good. I will put those notes up just so you guys can see. I mean, they look, yeah, but you would not. Uh, so I mean, that's what they look like, and that's what their pikes look like. But again, they also have modern firearms, so don't think that's all they've got going for them. Okay, that's where we will stop with the Swiss Guards.